Hey guys, Dustin Witt.
Hey, this is Scott Snyder.
This is Paul Dini.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
And you're listening to Bat Force Radio.
You're listening to Bat Force Radio.
This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman, and you're listening to Bat Force Radio, so stay tuned.
Welcome back to Bat Force Radio. We are very privileged to be doing this one this week, so we will get right into it. We have got Bat Force Tom in California.
Hey.
And I'm Robin Cross in Canada. And you will know this week's guest from his work in Detective Comics, Star Wars, Catwoman, a ton of other things. But this week he joins us to discuss something very different. If you've listened to the show before, you probably know that I'm a big supporter of James Tynion, the work that he does. I know Tom is also a big fan of the Department of Truth. There's also Something's Killing the Children, Nice House on the Lake, The Closet, Razor Blades, Wind, etc. James is back this week with, this month, with something darker and maybe more sinister than anything he's done before in the form of World Tree from Image Comics. And James has built this situation where he works with this stable of fantastic co-creators, collaborators, guys like w0rldtr33, Martin Simmons, Alvaro Martinez, and this week's guest, James's co-creator, collaborator on World Tree, helping us introduce this to the world. Joining us for the first time is Fernando Blanco.
Hello.
Thank you, Fernando, for being here, taking the time. I know you're all the way in Barcelona. You're in a different time zone than either Tom or myself. Really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
You're welcome. Thank you to you too.
Yeah.
And before we get started, I do want to touch on, we're coming off the back of an unfortunate announcement that came out this past Friday, the release of World Tree issue 1, which was originally scheduled for April 12th, has been bumped back to April 26th. Now, this is due to a printing error on a couple of the covers, which unfortunately made them way too dark, and it was really a shame. I did see how they printed out, and so much of the art is lost. So I do want to commend yourself, James, the whole team of creators on this, everyone at Image, for that commitment to all the way. It's not a small task to recall a printing of a book and send it back to reprinting, but you guys made the difficult choice to do that for the good of the product that you're putting out. So we all appreciate your dedication to that. But outside of that, we're going to get past that. The book is still coming out. So how is everything else with you?
Well, I'm eager to see the book on the hands of the readers and to see the cover properly printed, because it's a little bit bumpy, this situation, but we are very committed to bring to the readers the best quality book in all senses, not just the inside of the book or the reading, just the product itself, and the quality of the printing, of course, and we considered that it is not the minimum quality acceptable in that as it was, so we decided to go to printer again.
Mm.
Yeah, and that is, well, it's a disappointment that the world is waiting a little bit longer. It's admirable dedication to go to all this and put off that date. It is going to be worth it in the end. But I want to get into, before we really get deep on WorldTree, I want to go back and just talk a bit about you. What was it? Do you remember the moment that, was there something you saw that made you decide, I want to be an artist. This is what I want to do.
Well, I don't think I have a moment of revelation, that I decided to be a comic artist, but I remember starting to reading comics very very young, and when I was a teenager, I remember reading Spanish magazines, which are versions of American magazines like 1984 or Creepy. And I remember to see the pictures of the artists like, Corben or Fernando Fernandez or Esteban Maroto, this kind of artists are working in these magazines, and see they're working on their studios, and dreaming that it could be a really good life to be drawing in your own, surrounded by books and records and pop culture in general, and for me it was a dream work. So I suppose that I have that in my mind, and I start to pursue at the beginning, not much consciously of what I'm doing, because I don't know exactly that there was a profession about doing comics, but at the end I realized that I could do it, and I try, and it happened. After the beginning, a little bit accidentally, because to be a professional comic artist in Spain is really difficult, and I didn't even plan it to work for the state at that time, because no one. When I started to draw comics, and not even the Bellowet, Carlos Pacheco, or Pascual Ferri or Oscar Jimenez, that first Spanish artist that started to work for the state, done even start I started at that moment. So I can imagine how that could work, and just trying to draw comics in fanzines in Spain, and little by little the things started to work. They come in these artists like Pacheco, Ferri, and in a moment I realized that there are a real possibility to live from comics, and that's, I don't know how to explain it in more detail in English. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Was there a specific project that you remember where you were working on that made you realize, wow, I can actually turn this into something of a living?
I don't know, because as I say, my conversion from a person that's make comics for an afición into someone professional was something very natural, because I started to publish in fanzines in Spain, and we contact with small publishers in Spain and they say to distribute our fanzine. And in one moment, I started to publish my own stories with that publisher. So it was, very very natural. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of stories were those at the very beginning that you were creating? What kind of comics were they?
I created a story. My first professional comic, understand it professional as a paid gig, because at the level of the quality, it wasn't absolutely professional, you know. But it was a story called Fabricante with a friend from the high school, José Ángel Lavilla. It was a thriller story about I don't remember the word in English. A killer, about a killer, a professional killer that was
assassin.
an assassin, and it was a little bit disaster guy, you know. Was a thriller, but was also a comedy, you know.
Okay.
And was 3 issues miniseries of 24 pages each issue, and that's what my first gig.
There's you have done a lot of superhero stuff in your career. You're coming back now. This is not a superhero story, kind of like a thriller. You know, we got lucky to read the first issue, and it's really messed up. You know, just the whole concept, the idea of the story, very non superhero, much more kind of like playing off of horror, playing off of thrills. When you were younger, what kind of comics did you kind of gravitate more? Were they superheroes? Were they thrillers? Was it horror comics? What kind of things do you remember really caught your attention?
When I was young, I don't read so much superheroes. I only remember the Spider-Man from Romita Junior. Romita Senior. Sorry. And I read a lot of books of Spider-Man because it wasn't mine. Wasn't the books was for my neighborhood, and when I go to his house, I read all the stuff I found, but I wasn't a superhero or adventures or whatever genre of comics reader. I read everything I find. I read funny books, Spanish funny books, or Conan books, or superheroes or whatever, but not especially superhero. I read everything, and when I was a teenager, I started to read more, focused on the things that I really liked. And I started to read the horror magazines that are like creepy or science fiction, like in 1994, or in Spain there is a magazine called Comics International that was a little bit. You have comics from Will Eisner, from The Spirit, or Alberto Breccia from Argentina, or Moebius, or Bande Dessinée, Hugo Pratt, this kind of thing. It's a little bit mix of all kind of comics, and I could discover a lot of masters of comic book and comic in general and all over the world in those magazines. But I started reading superheroes when I was in a more frequent way when I was around 20s.
Yeah.
So you mentioned it being difficult to get into American comics as a result of where you're from, but eventually, as a result of your abilities and your dedication, you do eventually make your way into doing American comics. Now, this James Tynion guy, he's a bit of a bad apple. How do you eventually end up working with James for the first time and come to know him?
I worked with James for the first time in Batman Eternal when he was the one of the main writers of the weekly book, and DC hired me for 4 issues, and I did 2 with James Tynion. and also was one of the supervisors of the main story, and also did 4 issues more from Batman and Robin Eternal, not with the writing of James, but he was one of the supervision with Scott Snyder. And I do in a couple of feelings from Detective Comics, something from GL Jack, and I think, well, James told me that was when I was doing that pages of GL Jack, he realized that he really liked to work in something more personal, creator oriented, or something like that with me. That could be a good idea. Eventually, it happened. You know.
Yeah. How was the idea kind of the the concept of the book that I really resonate with is the idea that there's something that you might see as a child or even as an adult, something that you shouldn't see, something that is so horrific and scary that it kind of erodes away at a little bit of your innocence or humanity. And I know from my experience being a kid and getting into things I wasn't supposed to, and of course because of the internet, the way it is, and things being exposed to you, that feeling, that feeling of the suspense and horror that you feel like in your chest, and that it almost gives you anxiety, that feeling. So the book, the first issue, captures it really well with the way these
Mm-hmm.
people kind of like, they almost kind of like have like a little mini seizure almost. You could see it. Um, do you remember when you were coming up? Was there anything about comics or art or anything that you pulled inspiration from with that idea for the book?
Mm. It's difficult to find a specific inspiration of whatever of my works, because I have a lot of influences, and probably there is an specific one, but I talk a lot with James about references and books and movies and comics and things that could influence in some ways for to our book, and we're talking about the Hard Cast series. We're talking about Cronenberg movies,
Mm,
Junhito mangas, uh, the industrial rock and techno from the 90s,
mm,
uh, bands like 19 Nail or Killing Joke, a lot of things. We put a lot of influence that curiously, between James and me are more than 15 years of difference,
mm,
and he when he was a child, he was very influenced by the end of the century culture, and I lived that culture in my 20s. So
mm,
we are connected through the time with that era, and we can start a lot of influence of that time.
mm, mm. Do you remember either like a movie or a comic or a book or anything? Do you remember the first time you were really scared by something that made you realize like, okay, I gotta put that down. I'm not ready for that yet. Like sometimes you'll open a book or a magazine and you'll be like, okay, like even as an adult, I was reading
Mm-hmm.
most recently Whitley Strieber. Oh God, they made a movie about it. It's an alien abduction book. I can't remember the name of it specifically, but Whitley Strieber, and it was a movie with Christopher Walken. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
the way he was just describing being at night in a bedroom, with like these alien beings coming into his bedroom. I was reading it at night, and I remember I had to close the book and then said, I'm gonna wait until morning to read this because the description is too good and too scary as an adult. Do you remember maybe the first time you had that feeling from something, comics, TV, anything, where you like had to put it down and put it away?
There's no one specific. There's tons of things that scared me as a child, and I loved horror when I was a child. I remember that I was talking with a friend about books of the library of our college, and he recommended me a book about a guy that transforms into a monster. The book was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but he didn't remember the title of the book. So I've been reading in the back of the books the argument to find that book. And finally, I read it, Kafka Metamorphosis.
Yeah.
Now,
With
Tom, I just want to go
11
back.
years old.
I just
So
want to go back,
I
Tom.
think
I think the I was just looking this up. I think the book you were talking about was Communion.
Yeah, Communion.
There we go. Okay. Back to it. Sorry.
so you can imagine that that was something really shocking for a 11 years old boy.
reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah.
No, but reading Metamorphosis, Kafka Metamorphosis. That was the book I read it at the end. So
yeah. Go ahead, Robin.
No, you're okay. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you something that I noticed about the art, specifically in the first issue, is there is some very brutal scenes, and some of the scary ones though are the ones that aren't even like gory, or there's a scene where I think one of the characters is getting off the motorcycle and just walking through a crowd of people, and just that image, the image of like someone going to do something that you kind of as the reader understand of what's going to happen next a little bit, and everyone else in that scene doesn't realize it. So it's like a tension that's building in those moments leading up to it. Do you feel, is there anything that you feel like for you builds those moments like cinematically or visually that inspires you, that you really kind of because that's what it felt like to me. Like part of the panels felt like, oh my god, that looks like it's a scene out of a movie where this character is very they're like walking with a purpose to do something, and it's almost like holy shit, like they're about to do that. And I found it very cinematic. Are there moments in movies that you really find inspiration in that kind of sense?
yeah, there's a lot of movies that I love, and I always analyze the shot of the movies and the scenes, but at the end I'm cinematic on one side, but on other side I try to be very comic storyteller. For me, it's impossible not to imagine a scene without putting the camera in a place and moving the camera through the space. But at the same time, I played a lot with the details of the shoots, looking for a more graphic composition of the page and the disposition of the panels and all the tools that comic books have, which are only for comic book language, aren't from cinema or other mediums. So I try to combine everything in a way that at the end is very instinctive. Sometimes you think things some results in a more specific way, but most of the time you simply imagine the scene in your head, and the shots come to your head, and don't think in a specific results at the moment. Simply you imagine the scene as it was, and put in panels. So it's, at the end, I've been always reading a lot of comics and seeing movies, and I process all this stuff, came to the work in a natural way. You At the beginning of my career, I have to think the things a little more, because sometimes you find a thing and you don't know how to solve it, because you don't have the tools and the the resources, the professional resources to solve a thing, and you have to think more. But at this point of my career, the things come easily. I just have to think more when I want to make something different to the usual storytelling. When I have to think a really special thing, in that moment I have to think what the elements I have on, what scene I have to play, and make the things a little bit different, and pump up the scene a little bit, you know.
Do you find that you have to get yourself in a certain headspace when working on a book like this? Because there's a lot of graphic, gore and kind of stuff like that. Not too much. There's some, and I think it's done in a way that it's just enough. It's not like overdone.
Yeah,
It's
not
just
gratuitous.
enough to disturb you, just a little bit. And when you're working on a book like this, do you like? Is there music? Are you watching a show? Are you listening to I don't know how you guys can do. There's artists who tell us they listen to podcasts and have like movies on while they're working, and it's like I can't walk and chew bubble gum, so I don't know how you guys are able to do that. But what is your normal process while you work? What do you like to have going on around you?
Uh, I when I depended that the moment of the war. Generally, when I doing the layout of the pages, I need silence mostly, to be quiet and silence. As much if I'm a little bit bored, I could hear classical music or instrumental music, but nothing else. And when I drawing and inking the pages, I used to hear music basically. I try to hear podcasts sometimes, or even hear audiobooks or TV shows. But I realized that when I have my attention put on something else outside the page, I start to doing the things automatically.
Yeah.
The things, the work is done and it's more or less well done, but I not put the same kind of effort that if I'm totally focusing when I'm done. So usually I only work with music
Yeah.
when I'm inking and drawing and that.
Now,
Yeah.
does what you have on in the background, like, does that ever change, like, based on what kind of material you're working on? Like, if you're drawing something that is, kind of superheroes, and, a little bit later, you'll have kind of one thing on, but maybe if you're doing something darker, like World Tree or something, does that affect what you would have on in the background? Like, oh, I want to have something a little more serious on in the background while I work on this serious book.
You mean about the kind of music I hear
Yeah,
when I
the kind of
working in a book
tone. Yeah.
like, when I started the book, James and I we talked a bit about the musical influences of the book, or more specifically, when I was designing the characters. I asked James what kind of music will hear the characters when they are young. But at the end, I started to hear at the beginning of the book a lot of music from the 90s, industrial rock, Nightingale, or more techno rock bands like Massive Attack or Prodigy and things like that. But at the end, I realized that I can be all the time hearing that one kind of music. I need a lot of, if you are working in comics, you are working 10 hours a day, and
Yeah.
you can be hearing all the time the same thing. So at the end, sometimes I I look for a more specific music for the work I'm doing, but the most of the time I'm hearing all kind of music because it's a way to be entertained and myself and not stressed me too much with the daily work.
Mm. Hmm.
So at this moment that we're recording this, originally issue 1 was due to be released yesterday, but we're now pushed off a couple weeks. So without spoiling things for listeners, we will keep this, largely spoiler free. But I wonder if you could explain to us what the story is of World Tree, what is World Tree, and how did this all begin? What was the genesis of you collaborating with James on the idea of World Tree?
Well, I think at the end, the basic idea about the World Tree is that on the 90s, the internet appears, and all people think that internet, especially the young people, we thought that internet will free us, and at the end, the things are not going well. Internet is not freeing us. And it's more the opposite. We are a slave for social networks, and it changes inside us our way to our behaviors, and things are changing and not for the best. And we are not Luddites, but we thought that the technology it could be something very good or could be something really bad depending on how they use it. So we are talking about this at the book, and it's all the the scenes, the horror that happened at the book is some kind of metaphor of that. Technology bad side, almost, and sometimes it's even literally, because sometimes the influence of the media and the internet in the world has a better, a really bad things could happen that happens not in a metaphorical way, instead very literally, and the I don't want to spoil, but some of the things that happen in the issue 1 are things that you could see almost every week in the world, maybe not as at the end it's comic fiction, and we exaggerated a little bit, but not too much. Really, it happens things like they are the ones are described on the book.
Hmm. How when thinking about the theme of the internet changing, changing people, changing the course of how people interact, where do you kind of reside on it? Do you feel like it's something that for you personally you find helpful, you find something that is beneficial, or do you feel like it distracts you a lot of times? Do you feel like it's something that is difficult to kind of break out of? Like, where do you kind of fall on it?
Well, I think that most of humans, I have a love-hate relation with social networks, and progressively I've been going out from social networks, but at the end sometimes I need to know what other friends are doing, and it's strange because 20 years ago you want to talk with a friend and you call him by phone. Now you ask him by WhatsApp if you can call him, or look at the. So it's strange, but you can't simply go and talk with a friend. You need the technology to make the intermediation between your friendship. It's weird. So at the end, I need the social network, but I try not to need too much.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like it's it's kind of a spectrum where people can fall. A lot of times it can consume them, and and it's
Yeah.
interesting, especially for getting the word out. It's almost like a lot of times you kind of need the publicity and the tools that the internet has to offer. So, when you're an artist, when you're someone that is trying to get the word out on the things that you're doing, it's almost like sometimes you have to use it. It's a pain in the butt. Like, especially now, it seems like with the internet, it feels like a lot of companies feel like after you've done the work of putting your product out, it's up to you now to be the one to push the information out by social media, which is crazy. It's like they're making you guys do your own publicity. They're making you do your own advertising. Where there used to be a whole industry that helped support that, where you do the work and then that's all you got to worry about. But now it's like, no, we have to do it ourselves. Luckily, I feel like the independent comic scene is very, very supported by fans, and so um, something that's been very cool about the internet, at least from what I've seen for this book specifically, I started hearing about this book. I had no idea what the story was about. I had no idea. I don't think I had even seen like a panel of artwork yet, but I kept hearing about it. I kept hearing about it. The name, of the title. And Robin even asked me, he's like, "Hey, have you heard of the book yet?" And I go, all I know is that everyone's talking about it right now.
Yeah.
So that was interesting for me in that the internet kind of did a lot of the work with at seeing the word of mouth kind of get around. Have you felt any of that with this book so far? Because for me personally, it's impossible, as someone who is into comics and reading comics, it has been impossible for me to not hear about this book. So what has your experience been on the other end of it? You're the creator. Like, what have you gotten a sense of from it?
Well, yes, it has been a little bit weird because I have the perception that when I was looking in Twitter or other social networks about other books, sometimes a book appears and all the people are talking about this book. But when it's your book, I have the perception that no one's talking about the book.
Yeah.
It's, maybe because it's at the same time that we launched the book, it happened of that debacle of Twitter with the Elon guy, and I felt that a year ago, I tweeted something, and I don't have too much followers in Twitter, but I see my Twitter could be seen by 8 or 10,000 people in the statics of the Twitter, and now it's just 2,000 or something like that. So I was trying to promote my book, and I was thinking all the time, but this tool is ruined. I can't promote my book with this, even if some good friends with a lot of followers retweet my stuff. It doesn't reach the people. I have that perception, but it happened. It looks that finally the the people heard about the book. So I suppose at the end it worked.
Hmm.
But for me, it has been a little bit a stressful situation because I was thinking all the time that the people doesn't hear enough about the book. But
Hmm.
I
Well,
suppose it was something more about my fear than the reality.
Well, I'll tell you, everyone I think hears about things from different avenues. Personally, I have had this book on my pull list at the comic shop since October 17th, the day that I'm on James' Substack list, his email list.
Yeah.
So the day it was October 17th, I believe, that he made the announcement of World Tree, and that was James is a guy that as soon as he announces a new book, okay, I'm getting it. So I've had it on my pull list since then, and I work at a comic shop, and our file system it all works through our website. So everyone, all of our customers have their own file on our website, and that's where they subscribe to things. So our website keeps track of how many people are subscribed to each title, and it gives us we can see a top 10 list. And I'll tell you, even though World Tree hasn't begun yet, it is already in our top 10 most subscribed comics. So it hasn't even started, but it's already in our top 10.
Yeah. At the end, James and I were talking about this, and I think that at the end, it's to promote a book is more effective direct system like Substack and newsletter that probably the social network that only they are useful to make some to beat the drums a bit, but at the end it's more efficient to talk directly with the people that are interested and move the book and have it in their shops and to move with their customers and that. So at the end, the thing that worked the best was the Substack newsletter of James.
Yeah, I think spreading it out, doing some of everything, a bit of there are certain people that do things like sign up to newsletters, speaking to a lot of customers. I know there are a lot of customers who don't do that kind of thing, but they do see the things on your social media or on James' social media, and then there's the word of mouth as well, and then people listening to interviews like this with creators like yourself. So I think spreading it around, doing some of this, some of that for all the marketing, balancing all of that out is an effective way to do things.
Yeah. At the end, everything said. But the problem is I'm very bad trying to promote my things on the social networks. I really don't understand how it works, and I only want to be drawing and not being promoting doing the work of promoting the books.
Well, with a book like this,
but I have to. So
with a book like this, it makes your work pretty easy. I think all you have to do, your work on a book like this is very striking, and I think if you post some pages for people to see, it's going to get attention, and people are going to definitely notice that and be interested.
Yeah, like the whole thing, that idea of the book in itself, with it being that feeling of fear and like the anxiety that you get from something that is not natural to be seen. Did you find that it was pretty free in the things that you were turning in, the themes that you're talking about? Image isn't really known for censoring or anything like that, but did you feel that process was pretty open and there wasn't a lot of, I guess, restriction for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful collaboration with James because he's very open at the visual part and of the storytelling, but also he included me in the process of the story, not the script, but we talk a lot about the background of the story, of the themes of what about the story was, and I think it's all happening in a very organic way. It's at the end. I think we reach a point that we don't even need to talk too much about the book. I have very clear what he looks for, and I think he I have to very clear what I want to draw. So at the end, it's always a pleasure to draw the script of James, and I think he enjoyed when I set the pages. So it happens in a very kind of natural way. But I think this is it's a very dense story. We have a lot of things to talk and and a lot of things to explain. I think it's going to be a book that will grow and evolve and touch a lot of thematicals and will happen a lot of things in every issue. That is something that we both want. We want to give the reader that the feeling that in every issue is important and tell us a story and the story moves. And we don't want to make a book that is just an excuse to show beautiful action and or happens just happens a lot of it, but in the end, you are telling all the time the same story. We want to talk about various things, and do something that the readers feels that is fresh in every issue.
That's a great thought because you have an extensive background working, with characters that are really well known. You know, superheroes specifically that have huge fan bases. They have long histories with backgrounds, and so a lot of times, comic artists will say, it feels like I'm kind of like an invited guest that I get to work in this world, and I borrow the character and I kind of add my little flair to him or her, and then I kind of give it back, right? And then the next kind of artist does their thing with it. With this is an entire world that you guys are creating on your own. You tell the story the way you want. You're creating the history, you're creating the characters and their flaws and their strengths as you go forward. Do you find that to be because of that? Do you find that to be exciting or is it scary?
Both things.
Yeah.
Because you must like to be scared. So
Yeah.
is I really when I have the when I receive the script from James, they are scary, and I have to make them in visuals more scary nearer. So it's challenging, but and it's scary, and it's at the end it's fun.
Hmm.
uh, so it's all together. It's a really good feeling.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because some of the things that bring you to an artist or some of the things that bring you to a writer, it's like I think most people, right? Like if they're working on a big two project on a DC or a Marvel book, they have a lot of eyes on it, and so people will start to enjoy it. But I really love when you follow those artists into their creator own projects, and then you start to realize I like this more than the
Mm,
like the big property stuff they were working on, like the Batman stuff or the whatever it might be. It's like yeah, you enjoy their work on it, but then you really love what they start to do on their own because you finally start to feel oh my god, like this is the artist or the writer completely free, completely unhinged, not having to
mhm,
work within any constraints, not having to kind of find that they're
mhm,
being told no. And that's this book is really exciting because um, you read the first issue, and what's great about it is you read the first issue and you're like, okay, where is this going? Where do these people come from? Like, what is like this is insane, right? With other books like detective comics or other things like that, yeah, the art is amazing, it looks great, but you have to work within that world. There's only
mm.
so much that you can break out of it, and unless you have
Yeah.
like meetings and talk to
Mhm,
editors and they give you the green light to kill a character, it's like no, this one like
mhm,
things like this, the what builds the suspense for the reader is that at any moment you can do anything to these characters and you kind of know that, and so it makes the anxiety a little bit higher, which makes the reading more fun. So
mhm,
that first issue, I feel like did a great job of bringing you into that feeling. When you think back, you were mentioning before, listening to things and making sure that you're not listening, you're not watching anything. It starts to find itself into the work, right? Are there any places where you have put in like personal Easter eggs or little things that are from your actual life in your art on purpose?
Mm, it's all mixed, you know.
Yeah.
I don't remember right now some specific Easter egg or reference to my life.
Yeah.
In but it's, you know, when you're working in superheroes, as you say, you are a bit constrained, but the universe and the specifics and the tradition of the superhero storytellers. But in a book like this, you can do whatever you want. For example, we James and we decided to use a 12 panel grid and a lot of pages, and specifically with two characters. And it's something that probably in a superhero book you can do that. Uh, you can do probably in a page or two, but not in many pages
Yeah.
or many and several issues, you know. But this kind of thing is, I try to when I started to work on the design of the character this summer. I've been looking for a lot of books that I wanted to read again, and we look very much into books that aren't superheroes. I will read again, for example, a lot of stuff from Charles Vance, or I don't remember the title of the book from Kirsware. Uh, the his most more important book, or the first more important book of Chris Ware. What's the name of the book? I don't remember now. I'm just a disaster sometimes with the name of the book. But you know, I've been reading different stuff, more for independent comics, or people that have a different storytelling approach in not superhero books, or not even comic books. I've been reading stuff uh, from Alberto Breccia, or there is a couple of artists from France that have done similar vibes to Charles Vance and Daniel Coates, that are Meso and Pyrrhus. I really like the kind of dark thriller style they have. Uh, this you know, this just trying to find things far from the classic storytelling superhero books that I've been doing in my previous career. I'll always like this kind of thing, but very often you can put this kind of the approach in a superhero book, but now I can. So I go fully into it, you know.
You were mentioning Chris Ware earlier. Was it the not Jimmy, not the Jimmy Corrigan stuff?
Jimmy Corrigan was
Jimmy
the book.
Corrigan? Okay, yeah, that was the one. Yeah.
Jimmy Corrigan, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then his other one was the Quimby. Yeah, Quimby the yeah. So yeah, it's you kind of were you're kind of reflaring the flavor of that to kind of get into it.
Sorry, I don't
Oh yeah,
understand the
you
question.
were rereading that kind of stuff to get into the kind of like flavor of what you're getting into with this book, which is I love. I think some of the things that I love so much about this kind of stuff is the suspense and the emotion that you can get from real. I mean, hopefully this stuff doesn't happen in real life, but like you said, you can see how it would, because this is a real setting. This is a real situation. You don't have to think too hard to find these events taking place. So I think that also helps to build onto the honesty and the anxiety that a story like this creates. Robin was just showing some panels, and then in the background that we have some of the really brutal stuff. When you draw stuff like that, do you yeah, like that, holy shit, like does that come from your own mind, or do you have to have reference to be able to get there? Because if you have to use reference, dear God, like I can only imagine like what you're looking at for hours on end to be able to then help you kind of get inspired.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I look for reference, and sometimes it's really disgusting the stuff you can find on the internet. But I try to, it's. I remember that Bernie Wrightson told a story that he has a dream about a decapitated body, and he imagined the neck with the veins and all the muscles coated and that, and he was able to draw exactly, but he didn't see something like that. He thinks he didn't see never something like that in his life. So at the end, I think it's something that you are able to imagine, because artists, we know how anatomy works, how muscles and veins and everything, and even if you haven't seen nothing like that, you can imagine that how this works and build it in your world. So at the end, you don't need to find too much reference to draw those kind of things. You can
Thank
do it
God.
with your knowledge of the human anatomy.
Yeah, thank God.
Fortunately.
Yeah.
So on the topic of that kind of stuff, the subject matter, what we're seeing, the visuals in a book like this, I think Image is a great place for that, because the things that Image is putting out, particularly these days, it seems such a free place. Like, there are other books from Image, like Lovesick from Luana Vecchio, books like Plush. It seems like they are really willing to let the creators just be free to create what they want to put out there. There are really no boundaries. What is your experience working with Image Comics so far?
They don't say absolutely nothing about the content of the book. We can do everything I want, everything we want, and also James, I already told in his Substack or some articles that he uses the status he reached in the industry to go more far on the of down boundaries of the horror genre, and he's trying to make his more horrifying book. And he's trying because he thinks he can do it now. Maybe some years ago he can't, but now he has he can break some unwritten laws about what you can show or not show in a comic book.
Well, I'm just looking at the time here, and I know that we've kept you for over an hour so far, so I want to make an effort to let you get back to real life over there. It's got to be getting late over there. Now, at this point, I want to point out again, the new release date for World Tree #1 is April 26th. So for anyone who is interested in checking this out, what should they expect from World Tree?
I think it's a book that if you are interested in what is happening with the technology nowadays, it's a lot of issues about the artificial intelligence or the social networks. And I feel like I think this book is gonna interest you because we are talking about this at the end, and we're talking about the conflict between technology and humanity. One of the reference book that James recommended me to read was the I don't remember the name of. I have a mix of the the name. Is the book is Joel Noah Jubari, maybe the book Sapiens, you know.
Okay. Okay.
And the continuation of the book was Homo Deus, and specifically the second book talks about the end of the humanism era, you know, because his the basic idea of the book is that humans, the science discovered that humans, we are just algorithms, and at the end, that could mean the end of the humanism. So, in a certain way, I think we are revelating again this idea. We think that we are more than algorithms, and the being human still have sense. We don't have to. If the technology leads to a different place, this has to be an inhuman place. It could be a human place after all, and we're trying to talk about this conflict in our book, and it's a very scary book in that sense. Because we are talking of a real conflict of our societies, but at the end we have we want to be positive and bring some hope on our book. Because we really believe in humanism and values, and I think they have sense even nowadays, with all these things that happen about that dark side we're talking at the beginning of the technology, that dark side of the technology, you know.
Yeah. So even though there's horror, there's scariness, there's ugliness, there's hope at the end of it, hopefully.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
but you know, at the end, you have idea about what would you want to talk about in a book, but at the end, the character takes life, and at the end we obey to the characters.
Yeah.
I hope that the story goes to a good place, but maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah. That's kind of interesting, though, to hear you, the creator, say it. You're not sure where it's going yet. It's kind of exciting. So that's
Yeah,
definitely
it's
more
also
reason to read.
a self-discovery process to us too.
Yeah, that's cool. That's why this is cooler. That's why it's cool. And you can't say that about superhero books. You kind of know where they're going to end up for the most part, right?
Yeah. The hero's going to win at the end, but
Yeah.
for a story like this, to have the freedom that the story is going to go where it needs to,
Exactly.
You and James are not completely in control of where it's going. You're going to let it go where it needs to, and that's a great story to read.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic feeling for us, because that makes the work always exciting and fresh for us. That is important when you try to do a book like this. That we hope that they would be on the shelf for many years. It's important not to be bored of the work you are doing. So for us, it's a more interesting approaching, not to have all under control and not to know exactly where the story goes.
And It's almost here now. Everyone will get it in their hands. That is April 26th, World Tree #1 from James Tynion, Fernando Blanco, Jordi Belair, Aditya Bidikar, and Image Comics. Thank you so much, Fernando. We look forward to the release of the book and everyone getting to see it. Appreciate the time you've given us here to talk about it, and we look forward to chatting again soon. We'll let you get back to life. You have a good night, and we will chat with you soon.
Thank you very much to you. It was a pleasure, and I hope my English was enough good to be understand what I talked about.
It was excellent.
It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. We will talk to you soon. You have a good night.
Good night to you. Good morning. What time is?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, I think. Yeah. Early afternoon.
Yeah.
For us.
Good afternoon. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Fernando. Take care.
Thanks to you.
And that was Fernando Blanco. This is Bat Force Radio. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.